Kia ora, ko Louis Collins aho, nau mai ki te whare, welcome to the House. Each sitting day before question time, the clerk of the House stands up and lists off all the papers, petitions, introduced bills and select committee reports. Among the reports presented to the House this week was the report of the Parliament Bill Committee on the Parliament Bill. The Parliament Bill received unanimous support in its first reading. In a nutshell, it consolidates existing legislation relating to the operation of Parliament and makes some changes to the powers of Parliament security officers, as well as the funding arrangements of Parliament agencies, the Office of the Clerk and Parliamentary Service. Despite being critically important to a functioning democracy, it would be fair to say that constitutional law reform isn't exactly everyone's cup of tea. But because the topic attracts the likes of former politicians, constitutional lawyers, academics and other pontificators, there were some quite profound suggestions during the submissions process. Some of them perhaps weren't within the scope of this legislation, but were deemed thought-provoking enough to be included in the report for future consideration. I sat down with two members of the committee to discuss the suggestion of a Parliamentary Budget Office.
Hi, Andy Foster here. I'm a New Zealand First List MP based in Wellington.
Kia ora, I'm Ricardo Menendez March. I'm a Green Party List MP and I'm the Green Party Musterer. This is something the Green Party has been calling for quite some time, about having the resources for opposition to be able to independently cost policies and proposals. Because parties who don't have access to the Treasury benches, have very little resources to actually cost their own policies. And I think it's important that we're able to actually quantify, for example, if we want to propose amazing radical things, like, for example, having more of our healthcare system being in the public hands, that we're able to actually communicate to the public how much that will cost and to have the resources to do so. That actually evens the playing field when it comes to the contest of ideas and for opposition to have the resources to then cost those policies. I think that will improve the transparency and the information that the public has in relationship to proposals that are put out by opposition. And in some ways, it also holds opposition more to account by the fact that it means we can't just put out policies without then having done a bit more of the homework on the fiscal implications of what we're proposing.
I think the proposition's a really good one because, we do hear a lot of both, frankly, from both sides of the House, and as you get closer to elections, it tends to get worse, that you hear basically promises being made about various different proposals. And to have a realistic costing around those sort of things, I think will be immensely valuable. Obviously, it starts getting difficult as you get too close to an election because you simply don't have the time to do it. But the more that the public can have confidence that what is being proposed will cost X or Y, the better it is. And I think it is a good discipline and hopefully would result in better decisions, but also the right kind of things being put in front of the public.
The success of those things, including, for example, how much research an opposition MP has access to via the Parliamentary Library, will ultimately depend on the members of that committee genuinely committed to resourcing the bodies that, for example, could enable us to better cost our policies. So I think the challenge will be actually for that committee, now that it's going to be set up in the future, to take a non-partisan approach to the funding of Parliament, so that actually we take a long-term view of saying no matter who's in the executive, no matter who's in opposition, for the sake of democracy, we should have a well-resourced institution that allows non-executive members to put out ideas and hold the executive to account.
I should just add that we're having this conversation because a lot of the submissions you received mentioned the possibility of a Parliamentary Budget Office. What did the public say about it?
I think broadly there was some support for the idea. People thought it was a very good concept.
Anything else that was interesting from the submissions that you thought, I didn't think that would come up?
I think there were some submissions that may have been seen as out of scope, but I think raised really good questions in relationship to how we see Parliament functioning later down the line. Something that was raised was the reality that the number of MPs that we have hasn't kept up with population changes. And that actually, I think, is a really good question that I want the public to consider going forward. Because as our population grows and the number of MPs remain the same, each MP actually has to serve a greater number of people with actually stagnant resources.
I think in terms of the first one of those things, the number of MPs, I would obviously note that our Parliament is relatively large compared to our population, compared to many other countries. That doesn't mean that we've got the right number or that they've got the wrong number. But the interesting question, which I don't think any of the submitters answered when they raised that proposition, was, is Parliament operating in the most effective and efficient way? It doesn't mean that you stop doing things, you don't stop scrutinising.
That was the Greens' Ricardo Menendez-March and New Zealand First's Andy Foster. There will be more from this conversation during our Sunday program. I te whakaronga koe ki te whare. You've been listening to The House, a program made with funding from Parliament's Office of the Clerk. Mā te wā.